When you look back now, and when you consider that Iowa State has the only football bowl subdivision stadium named for an African American, the story is extremely touching.
His grandfather was a slave, a freed slave. So he was just twice removed, generationally speaking, from slavery.
I think the legacy of Jack Trice is actually several-fold. Number one, he was an outstanding student. He was a guy who achieved at about 90% grade level, which is right up there, close to the A level, over the A level. He was a good person that people liked being around. His teammates liked being around him. And so he really was a great representative of Iowa State University.
So they traveled, they had no problem traveling up by train, and Jack actually stayed in the same hotel with the rest of the team, but they wouldn't let him eat in the dining room. And his players, his teammates took that very, very hard. They were very upset, and by the accounts that I've read, Jack said, "That's okay, I will eat in my room." And he ate in his room that night, and he wrote a very solemn letter to himself.
To whom it may concern, my thoughts just before the first real college game of my life. The honor of my race, family, and self is at stake. Everyone is expecting me to do big things. I will. My whole body and soul are to be thrown recklessly about the field tomorrow. Every time the ball is snapped, I will be trying to do more than my part. On all defensive plays, I must break through the opponent's line and stop the play in their territory. Beware of mass interference. Fight low with your eyes open and toward the play. Roll back the interference. Watch out for cross bucks and reverse end runs. Be on your toes every minute if you expect to make good. Jack.
In the first period of play, in the first couple of minutes, apparently Jack broke his collarbone. It was such a serious injury that he came to the sideline. The doctor, the team physician, checked him out. At the time, didn't know it was a broken collarbone, but Jack kept saying, "I'm okay to go back in," so the coach sent him back in, and he still played very, very good football through the rest of the first half. In the second half, early in the third period, it's what's called a roll-back block. The Minnesota team had the ball. Jack was running around the line trying to get at the ball carrier. He threw a rolling block, which apparently knocked down two Minnesota Gophers. They all got back up, and before Jack could get back to his feet, they ran right over him to get downfield where the play was. And apparently they stepped very heavily on his abdominal area and his chest, because he barely could get up. He was staggering, his teammates said. They saw he was very seriously hurt. He went to the sidelines. He was checked again by the physician. The physician suggested to the coach that they leave the game, those two, the physician and Jack Trice, and go to a hospital and have him checked out. There was a hospital nearby. And they did. Jack was in great pain. Apparently somebody suggested maybe he should stay overnight, but he wanted to go back with the team.
Overnight, his condition worsened. He had trouble breathing regularly, and so they called Dr. Oliver Fay, who at the time, that was about the best surgeon you could get in the state of Iowa. He was a very respected doctor.
The physician late that afternoon said, "It's a very serious condition. I'm just not sure what I can do. We can't operate at this point because we think that could be fatal."
He obviously had internal injuries, which at that time could not be diagnosed. And as the day wore on, he developed pneumonia.
His young bride, Cora May, of course, came and sat by his side throughout the night. And she said that Jack opened his eyes and smiled, but didn't really communicate with her. And the next morning, Jack Trice died.
They planned to have a funeral service at the Campanile. And you have to remember, Iowa State, it wasn't the 28,000 student university it is today. You had a school of about 3,000 people.
Classes were suspended that afternoon, and the next day they had a ceremony honoring Jack Trice prior to the burial on the campus by the Campanile, and 4,000 people showed up. That's almost the entire student body at that point. The fact that students would care enough to start a movement to see that this young man with this magnificent story is not forgotten, and that Iowa State University would come together and help to further his legacy, that they would name their football stadium after a man who only played 2 games. Just says a lot about the school and the type of people that we have in the state of Iowa.
There is a statue outside the stadium, has Jack standing with one knee up, and in his hands is the letter that he actually wrote, and they dedicated that in 1997, before the first game of the 1997 season. Now, also detailing his life is an excellent sculpture that is up on the East Concourse for people to see right outside of what is now the Jack Trice Club, where fans gather before and during the game. Iowa State has the only football bowl subdivision stadium named for an African American.
I think the story and the legacy of Jack Trice is magnificent, frankly. It cuts beyond racial boundaries. It tells you that we're all together in this thing we call life. We come, we journey through it, and we leave. And it doesn't have anything to do with race. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. It doesn't have anything to do with ethnicity or religion. It has to do with the bonding together of the human species.